Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today's episode 106, and we're interviewing Heidi H. How are you doing today, Heidi?
Hey, hi, I'm doing great. Thank you.
All right, I'm glad to have you on here. So let's dive in. Tell me about growing up. What was your childhood like?
So, as you can hear, I do have an accent. So I'm actually African. So I was born in South Africa, second generation South Africa. So I had a really good childhood on certain levels. So I had loving parents. I came from truly a loving family with an extended family of grandparents and cousins and a very close family. And my father was very successful, and he was a somebody in the community, and my parents helped build community. And my grandparents had escaped from Europe, that escaped from Russia and Poland and Germany, and they had come as refugees, essentially. They'd lost most of their family during the Second World War. And I grew up in very interesting times because I am almost 57, actually. So I grew up in a time in South Africa where I had this Jewish family living in apartheid South Africa, which was, I come from the place where your color of skin and what you were was defined everything. It defined your future, it defined where you would go to school, it defined who you'd hang out, it defined everything. So people were judged on everything. They were judged on everything on the external, what color you were, how tall you were, what religion you were, where you hung out, where you lived, where you went to. They judged everything because it was way easier to judge things on the outside than to actually look at the stuff that was happening. So it was very difficult for me trying to comprehend how you can live, having survived something where you escaped based on racial grounds and ethnic grounds, to come live and perpetuate a system that was extremely unjust. So I was always caught up in this dichotomy. So even though I had all these beautiful things at home, and I grew up in a beautiful home in beautiful homes, I was always different. I felt like I was the alien. I felt like I'd been transplanted here and I didn't fit in. And it's not that anyone told me they didn't love me, but I just felt different. I went to a school that I was either one of the Jews in the school because I am Jewish, or I was always different. I wasn't tall enough, I wasn't blonde enough, I wasn't thin enough, I wasn't enough. And for me,
Were you treated differently because you were Jewish?
Absolutely, everyone was treated differently. I wasn't supposed to. I come from a place where we had church and state. So the day would start off that you would actually have an assembly, that you'd actually go and pray and then read scripture from the First Testament. And this was public schooling. I didn't go to a parochial school. I went to a public school. We had uniforms and you were made to conform. Like, people were made to look the same, act the same, speak the same. There was this sense of uniformity, because when you did that and you created this almost artificial kind of way of being, it took away all the other stuff that you didn't look at. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people living in slums and people having to travel long distances to come work in your home and be taken away from their families. And it took your mind and your focus off different things. And it also created that thing that I'm better than you. Because if I'm this, then I'm better than you. So if I'm a man, I'm better than a woman. If I'm white, I'm better than black. If I'm a Jew, I'm less than a Catholic, or I'm not Lebanese, or I'm not whatever, So there was always these structures and these divisions. And if you weren't thin enough, the thin thing for me. So I'm an addict, and I say that off the bat, because why I'm an addict, who knows? There are lots of reasons I could look at and try explain it and nail it down and look at it. But the truth is, really, at the bottom line, I just always have done things differently. I had my first drink at 7. I come from that leave it to beaver kind of thing. Where
you just said that. My interview before you, the girl said she had her first drink at 8, and I thought that was the youngest I've ever heard. So now you beat her.
So the weirdest thing is, I actually found a photograph of it. Okay, we're going
you
down
drinking at 7?
At 7. So we're going down Lake Kariba in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. Okay, it's a whole family thing. Grandparents, parents. Drinking was never taboo in my family. It was a leave it to beaver kind of thing. People had cocktails. People got dressed up for dinner. We sat down to 4 courses. Things were a little sophisticated. So we're going on the sunset cruise, and there I am, and I have my first beer shandy. And I remember that, and it's documented in a photograph, and my parents thought it was very funny. And everyone did, how cute is Heidi? As the oldest out of my siblings and out of all my first cousins. And so I was kind of the trailblazer and the rebel. So it was all very, very cute. And then I started getting into amphetamines by the time I was 12. And the reason why I got into amphetamines was because every single diet pill in the 70s had amphetamines in them. And they were sold over the counter. And
you were taking diet pills at age 12?
I was taking diet pills from the age of 12. I have been on every single diet that you can ever think of. I have gained and lost over 600 pounds just in 8 years. I'm that compulsive of it. I'm that binger, I'm that purger. I've blown out my colon. I lived with a colostomy bag. I've had bariatric surgery. I'm an addict. So one for me is never enough. It is like one, what do they say? One is too many, 1,000's never enough.
Yep.
And that can be with anything. So the actual, I've had different drugs, whether we say it's alcohol, it's drugs, it's sex, it's shopping, it doesn't matter. Anger, I get off on anger. It doesn't matter. Anything that shifts how I feel and I want to change how I feel, I will use it. So you asked me about the childhood. So I just want to stay present and actually deal with that as we were talking, as we were speaking. So I left home at 17. I really, so I just had to tell you something. Things always happen in my world. So all of a sudden the dogs have been absolutely quiet up until now. So I have to close this door, otherwise you're going to hear these like little clumping. Is this going to screw up your thing? Hold on one second. Okay, hold on. So now this would have left me mortified in the past. I would have been embarrassed, and I would have been too embarrassed to actually like show my face, and I would have been like so full of guilt and shame. But now I can actually laugh about it because it is actually funny.
Yes, it is.
So I'm the kind of person that I had a beautiful family. I'm the addict in my family. So I'm the one that's different.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're part of the maybe 5%, because remember I was telling you before, I've done over 100 interviews from the podcast, and maybe 5% of the people had an okay childhood or a good childhood at that. Pretty much everybody had some baggage. I hear it all. You should hear the stuff. The only baggage you had is you started so young.
Well, there were a couple of things. I grew up with the extenuating stuff I couldn't control. When you live in an unjust society and to the bottom of your soul and your being that something's wrong and no one's listening to you because you can see it, and you say stuff and people tell you, oh, Heidi, nonsense. Oh, Heidi, that's not. And then you start feeling different. So I started acting out in other ways, got into sex early, it's other things, attention seeking. I was a big attention seeker. If you told me something was like this, I had to be the opposite. So I could just be different. So in school, we were never allowed to discuss sex or, I grew up in a very, very conservative, very rigid environment. You don't discuss politics, you don't discuss sex. We didn't have sex education at school, but I was the one reading poetry in school from Black poets. I mean, my teachers didn't know what to do with me because I was different. So I always pushed the edge a little bit, but then I had to deal with consequences. It was kind of cool. For me, it was kind of cool. I like that I like skirting with the dangerous and the different, and I like the vibe, I like the high. And then the first time I actually really got into, I grew up in a place where you weren't illegal drugs. Everything was illegal when I grew up, other than amphetamines, and other than diet pills, and sleeping pills. But that wasn't really my vibe. My vibe, and honestly, my longest relationship with drugs was marijuana. And that I say because that is my truth. It was a 32-year relationship, and it took me to my lowest low. It didn't matter about all the other recreational stuff. And I always say the stuff I've done, if I could smoke it or snort it, if it could go up my nose or I could smoke it, I was all over it. I didn't stick a needle in my arm because I'm scared of needles. But and also the truth is I wasn't around people who were using stuff like that, because I'm the type of addict that if you told me something was good, I liked good. You know, I got into what I was doing because it was fun in the beginning. I didn't get into stuff in the beginning because it wasn't fun. You know, I got some kind of a payoff, and most of that payoff was it was fun. And the first time I got a high on pot, I was paranoid. I didn't believe I'd go home or make it home. I hated it. I hated it. It was the worst experience of my life. And the next day I did it again. That's crazy. That's the insanity.
Yep, that is insanity.
You know,
So many of us do it. We do something, we regret it, we say never again, we feel like garbage, we're just filled with shame and guilt. And then the next day comes and we're sober and we're like, yeah, this time I could control it. This time will be different. Some reason this time will always be different.
So the insanity for me really is, they say insanity is like doing something over, you know, doing something over and over again, expecting different results.
Yep.
That's not my story. My insanity is doing something over and over again, knowing exactly what was going to happen. Okay, I knew exactly what would happen. So today, I would go, I'd get effed up. Okay, I'd go party, as we call it. Okay, I'd party before the party to go party, and then I'd party after the party so I could go to sleep. I mean, insanity. Okay, I couldn't go to sleep until I'd copped. And once I'd copped, I could go to sleep. I was wasting this money to go to sleep. I mean, I look at this now, but so the next day I'd wake up, or the night before I'd go, I promised, you know what, maybe I'll just keep some for the morning. This will be my last hit of the day, and then I won't use anymore. Or maybe I'll finish everything tonight, and I promise tomorrow, and I meant it from the bottom of my heart, because you know what, I love my kids, and I love my husband, my then husband, and I love my parents, and I loved whatever it was. And I meant it 100% with every part of my being. I promise tomorrow I'm not going to do it. And all of a sudden you get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or you get that thought. And the minute that thought happens, it's a call to action. And that's my job. That becomes my job. That is, it tells me where to go, who to be with, when to show up, what to do, where to give my money. Do you know how many people I've sent to college? Do you know how many holidays are paid for? Okay. So yeah, that's insanity of it, you know. And it's so crazy because it's the only disease of denial. It's the only disease that you actually come out of it once you get some recovery under your belt, feeling way better than you ever went into it.
Yeah, I mean, detox is a lot. I mean, once you get that out of your system, you kind of see things differently.
So 100%. I mean, it just takes, you know, everyone's journey is different. You know, I really, really believe that. And mine has taken me to many, many places because I'm a runner. So I've lived in many different places around the world, many different places in South Africa. I'd get into relationships and I'd leave.
Real quick, going back to your childhood, because you were drinking and doing drugs so young. How was school for you?
I wasn't doing it consistently. I was a social drinker. Okay, so I was a social drinker. So I'd get together with the girls and we'd land up in the hot tub and we'd finish a couple of bottles of wine. I hated being drunk.
And how old are we talking about right now?
So once I started at 7, I was really more by 12 o'clock. I was getting into boys. I was getting into drinking more consistently. I was very into amphetamines were my jam because I could stay up for 3-4 days at a time, do really well at school, really focused. Obsessed about the Holocaust. I was obsessed. I mean, honestly, I think my first real addiction was fantasy. I'd read 5-6 books a week. You know, remember, I come from South Africa. We never had TV till I was 12 years old. And what I mean is we never had TV. The country did not have a broadcasting corporation until 1977 or 78. Like, it did not exist. Like, there was no TV. So we grew up reading books and we grew up playing and hanging out with friends and doing that kind of stuff. But books were my fantasy. That's where I'd get lost, and books and sports, those were what I did. And putting on plays and dancing and doing that kind of stuff. Anything not being still. No, crazy.
So how far did you get in school?
I finished school. Not only did I finish school, okay, but I actually went to grade school afterwards. So I went to college as well. So I finished school. I was never a great student. I was one of those, people that got by. Okay, so I was always like that average. So I was always a C student. Like I was an average student. I hated school. I think I was bored. I really think I was bored. I loved the social parts of school and the sports, but I was never academic at school. It didn't do it for me. But I went to Israel after I graduated, which was really tough. So I come from a place I wasn't allowed to wear makeup until I was 15 years old. I come from a place I was never allowed to go away with my friends until I was 18 years old. We didn't start driving until we were 18. So stuff we did was really, you went out, you came home from school, you went out, you had to be home when it was dark. Like your parents didn't crack you on the phone. There were no phones.
Yeah.
Everything was connected to the wall. Okay, you had to be there to dial it, but everyone knew where we were, and I was raised by a village. So anything that happened was discussed by everybody. So I come from a place, you don't talk about what happened in the house. You never share your feelings. You don't talk about what is happening here. This is private business. So you never discuss family and money. Like those were taboo subjects altogether. So it was always about pretending to look good on the outside. So what happened was we never spoke about the important stuff, which was really the important stuff, which is how you're feeling and how do you deal with life as it shows up? How do you tell someone you're scared? Because that's a sign of weakness. Keep all these secrets, keep the shame and stuff them down and eat them. And that's what I've done. Food has always been one of my biggest challenges in terms of my eating addiction.
When did that start?
Probably around about 6. I mean, honestly, my stuff started kicking in really young because I come from that place. It's all about food and guilt. Okay.
All about food and guilt.
That's part of the culture. Okay. We eat and we make each other feel guilty and we laugh. I mean, we laughed a lot as a family. It was a really fun family. Funny. My father was very, very funny. He was hysterical and a really good man. And today I honestly believe my parents did the best they could. Actually today, having lost both my parents, one of the biggest realizations was I carried a lot of resentments, resentments of, I've got 2 other sisters and I'd lost 2 brothers. And I had these resentments, and about my parents and all this crazy stuff. And I reached a stage where I realized that they're not here anymore. Like that ideal childhood that I thought I could always recreate or that I should have had isn't ever going to happen. And my parents were amazing. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. And I've learned through my journey that I am amazing, and I never felt amazing up until the last 4.5 years. So I'm 4.5 years back. So I only have 4.5 consecutive years of recovery. So with believing that you're not worthwhile and believing that you're less than, and actually believing you're a piece of shit is really where I came from. Wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't thin enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't all the stuff enough. And that's crazy. I put so much importance on the external crazy stuff of how much that scale would tell me that I weighed thin. That would determine whether I was having a good or bad day. Determine whether I put my fingers down my throat and throw up. Would determine what I'd eat or not eat, whether I'd restrict or not restrict. And then when I'd get upset, I'd punish myself either with food or something else because I wanted to be numb. And that's what all I wanted to do is I did not want to feel, and then I wanted to die, and then I couldn't die. And this crazy stuff. So I've got all these amazing things. So from the outside, everything looks beautiful and amazing and fantastic and exciting. And I'm working and I'm accomplishing stuff and going places and doing stuff. And on the inside, I'm hollow and empty. How crazy is that?
It's very crazy.
Crazy.
It's sad what we have to go through. So once you got out of college, what was life like? Did you go to work? Did you have a job?
Oh, okay. So I started my first charity at 12. So I
Your
like
first what?
My first not-for-profit at 12 years old. I started my first business at 17 when I went to go register a company with an attorney. I told him his place looked terrible and I needed to refurbish it, and he became my first client. I've always worked. I worked for my parents when, as a little kid, in their office. In fact, I'm one of the few people today who can say I can work one of those switchboards where you had to put in the wires.
Really?
Yeah, dinkum. That's one of the things I can do. I did that in my dad's office many, many, many years. But I've always worked. So I was a waitress. I went to school. I went to college. I majored in archaeology, anthropology, and political studies. All
Wow.
stuff I've done nothing with, but definitely loved doing it when I did it. I was on campus in a really interesting time at the height of apartheid, when it was all riots and underground bands. And remember, we were blacklisted. There was no music in South Africa. So I mean, very
Really?
few international artists came to South Africa. We were blacklisted. We had, if you wanted to see people who were blacklisted, it was underground stuff and people could get arrested for it. So I heard some amazing speakers and met some incredible people who affected history and did incredible stuff. Got to hear amazing musicians, but some of the stuff we didn't hear here. If it wasn't that was here, we don't know. But the weird thing is we still knew what was happening because we still got to hear the top 40 on a Sunday morning, and we grew up with the radio. It was a little bit different. But through my journey, I've managed to meet amazing people. I've always been really successful at work. Like, I've always been really successful at juggling stuff and being able to do stuff and create stuff. I'm a creator. I've created careers and jobs for myself because I believed I was unemployable. And I'm better. And I work hard, I've got a really great work ethic, and I've been blessed. I really honestly believe I've been truly blessed. So what happened after school is the interesting part, the next part of the journey. So I came to live in the States for a period of time. In fact, I'm very involved with someone, super involved with someone in South Africa, in Cape Town. Lived in a beautiful city in South Africa. Using pretty heavily, the psychedelics are my thing, and love smoking, and I'm
A lot of LSD. Was it LSD?
Oh, LSD, but acid wasn't so much my thing. Magic mushrooms, ecstasy was a jam in the 80s, like Coke was a big thing. But pot was always my thing. Pot was always my first choice and my last choice. I used to buy it by the brick. Last me 3 days, and I used to have
a brick of weed only lasts 3 days.
Yeah, it lasts like 3 days, okay, because I'd have 30 cigarettes and 30 joints rolled, and that's how I'd walk around. Okay, I'd have a box of each, okay. And it was also cheap in South Africa. I never ever thought this stuff cost money. So but last 3 days I was a party girl. I was the one that I thought I was a lot of fun, until I look at those things, water skiing down the river naked, not so much fun for the family sitting on the side there with their kids, doing crazy stuff, being the one on tables or flashing people. Like I was an exhibitionist, I really was. I think it really covered up a lot of insecurities, overcompensating. So anyway, I'm seeing someone, we've been together for a long time, hell of a nice guy, really nice guy. Have one of the parties at my house, because I was always at parties, going to parties. I worked, I was at school, partied a lot. And two guys came, and they had this modeling agency in LA, and they said, this is an awesome party, why don't you come visit? I could never model because I could never be in front of the camera. I could never look at myself in the face and be happy with what I saw. There are very few pictures of me throughout history. Very, very few pictures, because I could never look at myself. I hated what I saw. I absolutely hated what I saw. It was never good enough. So I said, cool. Land up in LA 2 weeks later, buy a ticket, go to LA, leave the guy, tell him I'm not coming back. We're about to get engaged. Tell him bye. My sister had to go and pack my shit up, because that's the stuff that I did. And I spent a year in LA, and I got into the film industry and got into crack. And I got into stuff that really made my life really unmanageable. I got to meet some really interesting people and do some amazing stuff. But it really helped me reach a bottom. But I never thought it was a bottom. My grandmother was dying at the same time, and I had to go back to South Africa. There was no crack in South Africa, and my life was just out of control. It was really out of control. I had a coffee shop at the airport. I'd just done a huge show to launch who then became one of the presidents of South Africa. I was doing design. I'm an interior designer. I was doing stage design. I was doing different design. And very successful on paper. But when you looked at other things, it was just a mess. It was a total mess. Fall pregnant, decided to have an abortion, and just go, something is so wrong in my world. Things are just not good. Leave the country, go on vacation, and meet someone who I think is the perfect husband. Meet this guy, okay, who actually is from South Africa, but I think he's a perfect husband because he'd make my parents happy. So what do we as addicts do? I'm a chameleon. I'm a shapeshifter. I can become anything you want me to become because that's how I used. You wanted to be around me. That way I never, ever had to look for something because it was always being offered. I was always invited. I was always included. I always got to go different places. Not always by the same people, but definitely got the invitation. So I end up meeting this guy who on paper is perfect. Like he's absolutely perfect, would make my parents super, super happy. End up getting married, end up immigrating to the States, and decide what do good addicts decide to do when things are starting to become a little uncomfortable. I decided to have children. So I end up having 2 kids. And I did not know that as an addict. I made my kids' lives miserable. I made my then husband's life miserable. I was miserable. I remember being so sad and so lonely. And
did you use during your pregnancy?
My pregnancy, when you immigrate, it's a different tempo. Everything's new. So life is very fast and time goes really quickly because you're learning new stuff. Like, what toilet paper do you buy? Okay, like what milk do you get? Where does this road go? Okay, where do I want to live? Like all these different things. How do I get a green card? Like there's so many things that for the first 5 years of immigration, I was so busy of doing stuff, and I've got 2 kids and their lives are busy and both of them have issues, and one is or has got Asperger's, and my kids have issues. And if I had to tell you all the stories, we'd be here for hours, but there's a lot of stuff. My kids are amazing. But
during your pregnancy, were you still drinking and using drugs, or did you quit?
No. One of the things, I actually stopped cold turkey. So one of the reason I had the abortion before was because I was using heavily, and I was worried that what I was doing would affect. I didn't want to have a kid like that. I was just doing way too much acid and all the other stuff, and I was just really, I didn't want to do that. Plus, the guy didn't want anything to do with me, and I didn't want to raise the kid on my own. And that's my truth. So this time when I felt pregnant was a little different because I'd made a conscious decision to be married, and I'd made a conscious decision to want to have children. We had discussed it and we had planned it, and we had decided this is what it was. And what I did was I got involved in the Jewish community, and I started volunteering at one of the biggest temples here, and I became a religious Jew. Again, this is what I did was I lived a very traditional Jewish existence, that we followed all the holidays, kept a kosher home, like super, super, super traditional. That became my world. And if I could fill it with other stuff, because remember, I'm an addict. So it doesn't matter what the substance is. It doesn't matter whether it's drugs, alcohol, smoking, food, shopping. It doesn't matter what it is. Pretending to be someone else, having a new project, starting businesses is another one of my favorites. There's like anything else to keep me moving and keep me shifting and keep that obsession and compulsion absolutely at the highest. Doesn't matter what it is. So all of a sudden things are super busy. So I stopped using. So I stopped using for a period of time. So I can stop, but I can't stay stopped. So for 7 years, I stopped doing any marijuana, smoking any pot whatsoever, but I didn't stop drinking. I wasn't a daytime drinker. I was a social drinker, but when I drank. Okay, I wasn't a blackout drinker. My biggest drug during that time was really self-pity, self-righteous anger. That absolute unmanageability in me, that resentment fueled me and kept me clean for a really long time. Resentment to my then husband, resentment for my kids and to my kids. I had a lot to deal with, and it was hard on my own without family being in Florida. So I had a lot of resentment. It kept me really, really centered for a really long time. Crazy as it sounds, it's true. And then the bottom fell out. Then stuff started happening. Then all the extreme dieting starts, and the HCGs and all these other things, gain 100 pounds, lose 100 pounds, the compulsive overeating, the obsession.
You were losing 100 pounds at a time and gaining. What's the most you've ever weighed? Did you say 600, or you said you?
No, within an 8-year period, I gained and lost 600 pounds.
Okay. And how much at a time do you think?
So at a time I did 4 bouts of HCG, and I'd lost 80 to 90 pounds each time, but I gained it back. So the most I'd lose within a period of time was close to like 100 pounds. The most I gained at a time was 250 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
So all of a sudden I find myself, so for me, I do have a higher power, and I call my higher power God. And I know this, for me, it's good orderly direction. Acronyms mean something for me. And I just, throughout my recovery, it's come to mean something different. So in the beginning, I was living in a dark space. I would fight with my then husband, so he would leave so I could binge and I could use and do whatever I was doing, whether it was eating or getting high and smoking pot. Like either way, I just wanted him and the kids gone and quiet and leaving me alone. So I'd be juggling their schedules and keeping them busy. And I was the PTA mom. I was the one who's involved in the schools and looking good. And I was that super mom, band chairwoman, like all that kind of stuff. Everything looked fabulous. I spoke beautifully. And on the inside, it was all rotten and there was nothing there. So anyway, 2014. No, 2014. So I've always been a business person, and I've always been involved in business, and I get introduced to a client, and at this stage I'm doing real estate, and she wants to open up an inpatient treatment center for food addiction.
How old were you?
This is 2014. So this is 8 years ago. I'm 56. So that makes me, you do the math.
48, I believe.
So I meet Dr. Felice, okay, and I'm 48 years old, and a month after, she wants to open up these inpatient treatment centers for food addiction. So 3 weeks later, I'm not feeling well, land up in hospital, my colon's perforated, I've got diverticulitis, I've got septicemia. I'm absolutely,
what happens to the colon? You said deteriorated?
Perforated.
Oh, perforated.
Perforated. So from what happens is if you binge eat to the extent that I was, you can actually create damage in your body, which means I've developed a hole in my colon, which means that all the crap that was in my system was actually going into my body.
Oh no.
I was filling up literally with crap. Shit. I was full of shit, okay? I always have.
You were full of shit, that's right. Wow.
Full of shit, okay? So so this happens on, seriously, so they've got to remove a part of my colon, and I live with a colostomy bag for 3 months, which means that I've got a bag on the outside of my body, which I'm crapping into.
Wow.
Okay, so anyway, so this happens on a Saturday. I'm a crazy addict because I've got this. Nothing gets me down. I've got this. I'm stronger than all of this because strength is everything. We don't show weakness. That's where I came from. You're never weak. You do everything for everybody else. You look good because looking good is the most important thing. So 3 weeks later, I cooked and hosted 33 people for the Jewish New Year. because that's what I did. Okay, so that's crazy. I didn't realize that I was an addict. So I'm hearing all this stuff about recovery, and it's interesting because it came back to me. I remember 2 years before I met Felice being in a bathroom, like crying, like just crying, like God, let me help me kill myself because I just don't want to do this anymore. There's nothing to live for. I've got kids. I don't want to be here. And I'm not getting high. I'm using because that's what happened. You know, my brain tells me that I still get high. The reality is I stopped getting high. I was using. I get high for this amount of time, and the rest of the time was a job, so I didn't get sick. But I wasn't getting high. I was just getting some. And I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know that there was another solution. I'd never heard of OA, NA. I'd never heard of any of these things until I actually met her. And she became the starting point in recovery for me. Okay. So all of a sudden, I, as a food addict, you know, we have detoxes and rehabs for drug addicts. The rehab for a food addict is you have bariatric surgery. So you go and you have bariatric surgery, and that's what I did. So I paid cash, $20,000 to have my stomach made smaller so I could eat less, because I always believed if you were thinner, you were happy. Doesn't that stand to reason? Like if you're thin, you have to be happy. How does that not work? Okay. So everything changed. So all of a sudden, I don't have my marijuana, I don't have my other drugs, I don't have my food. Talk about some unmanageability. What do you put in that space? Like if I've always put something in there, what do you put in that space when you've got nothing else to use? So anyway, turns out I'm going to just fast forward to a little bit because I could talk to you all day, and I know you've got other things to do.
No, you take your time. That's what we're here for.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So 2016, I can't walk, I can't breathe because I'm so overweight. I'm struggling to actually breathe, and I decided to have bariatric.
How much did you weigh at the time? And once again, take your time telling the story. You have all the time you want.
Okay, so I'm about 270 pounds at that stage. Currently, I'm on 140. So the difference between that and here is a big difference for me. It's like essentially carrying two of me. So I've got me on my shoulders. Okay. Yeah. So go for bariatric surgery, and so it's 2017, not 2017. Go to South Africa, everything's beautiful. You know, I'm losing weight quickly. I'm in recovery, some kind of process of recovery. Felice and I are running these online meetings because I can speak recovery. I'm amazing. I'm a very quick learner. I've got dyslexia. So I learn to mimic things. I'm a mimic. You can teach me anything and I pick it up like this because that's what I did to survive, you know. So we're running these meetings. We're running these hybrid meetings on Zoom and on Facebook and on YouTube and stuff. And we're running these weekly meetings for addiction, for food addiction. And we've got people in my house because that's what we did as well. We put them in my house, and my kids are going crazy, and my now ex is going crazy because all these strangers are arriving on a Sunday for meetings and Tuesday night and Thursday night. And we're running these meetings, and I'm speaking recovery, and I'm speaking it, but I realized I wasn't getting it. I wasn't internalizing it. And the way I know I wasn't internalizing it was in 2017, we go on the safari, we go to South Africa to family, and I knew I was going to relapse. I knew without a question of a doubt. I planned it. I was going to meetings. I was writing steps. I was doing the work. I had a sponsor. I was doing all the stuff that we talk about doing, except I had a plan. So prelapse happens way before we actually pick up.
Yep.
It starts with entertaining that thought. Okay, so I'm going to people, places, and things. I knew I was going to pick up. I just knew it. I didn't realize that the consequences would be that great when I did. So we go to South Africa. We got 2 bar mitzvahs to go to. It's my sister's engagement. It's all good stuff. We're going on safari. I've got this beautiful 6,000 square foot house that I'm living in. Like I've got the husband, I've got the kids, we've got the cars, I've got everything you can actually imagine. I've got the job, I've got everything on paper. Everything's beautiful, and I'm losing weight, and life is perfect. And people tell me you look fantastic. And life is awesome until I pick up. And all of a sudden I pick up one day because I knew I would, and I couldn't stop. And the time that it took me you know, in the beginning, we get high a little bit. So it starts off as fun, and then it's fun and problems, and then it becomes problems. So now it starts off as fun, and then the problems just start. So I become that person that's nodding off at all the events. And I become that person that my kids are coming to in the garden and saying, Mommy, please don't do this. Mommy, please don't be embarrassed. The cousins are here, the families here, the friends are here. These are here, and you're an embarrassment. And my then ex is going, tell me you don't have drugs and you're not taking them with you on the airplane. I'm going, I swear I don't have anything with me. And I started doing stuff and lying and juggling and doing all the crap that we do, because that's what we do. Because when I'm in active addiction, I become that person that is another person. Like all I can think about is getting more, using more. It doesn't matter about you. It's not that I don't care about you, you know, logically I care about you, you know, but do I really care about you that much that I want to stop, and I don't want to do this, but I do want to do it. And I don't know how I'm going to stop. So all of a sudden I come back and I realized I had to do something, because this is not how I want to live my life and not what I want to do. And this is in 2017. So I decided I'm going to do something I've never done before, which is walk into a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, because I've spent a year and a half in AA. I'd spent in and out of OA, because you know what, I couldn't understand how people are telling me they're in recovery and weight was everything to me, and that I look healthy and happy. Okay. And I just couldn't reconcile that. And I'm not an alcoholic, but I could actually identify with using alcoholically, and those being a dry drunk or being that dry drunk kind of phenomenon. I could relate to the spiritual principles, and I could relate to a lot. And I'm really grateful for what I've got out of that program. But honestly, I'm not an alcoholic, because my problem is not just one substance. For me, I needed to walk into an NA meeting, and I did. And the reason I say this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this again. She's going to drive you crazy. I inherited 2 dogs when my parents died. Okay. People get property and prestige. I got 2 dogs from New York. For 1 second. So Pinky and Cuddles, and she'll sit outside shouting at you until you let her in. So I apologize. So
That's okay.
So I walk into NA, and 3 weeks after I walk into NA, my amazing mother dies. My amazing mother, they're living up in New York. I live in Florida, and my mother got sick. And my mother was amazing. If I tell you, my mother was one of those extraordinary people that at a funeral, her oncologist and the doctors came, and the people that came to a funeral are not people you'd imagine to come. She was just one of those special human beings. And my mother dies, and I don't know what to do. Because when you take out the drugs, what do you fill that with? My only coping mechanism I'd ever known was putting something in, or using something, or acting out, or doing something so I could change how I feel, how I was feeling. How do I deal with grief when I don't really know what it looks like or feels like? I'm not on this level. You know, I'd lost animals and pets and stuff, and I'd lost my grandparents, but it wasn't the same as losing my amazing mother. You know, and during that time, I went to meetings, and I used to go to meetings late at night, because my father hated NA. Like, he just didn't get it, hated it. Okay.
Did he?
Yeah, I just didn't get it. You know, for me, most people didn't know I was an addict, because I hid it. I was a great liar. I'm a professional liar. I can hide things. So everything looks good on the outside, and on the inside, I'm dying.
I know the feeling.
Right. So I would clean up to show up. So I'd show up for periods of time and be on my own this amount of time. So I could show up for an occasion, or I can show up to go to New York for 2 days, you know, and while my parents are asleep or whatever, you know, make a plan. So it always looks good, but it doesn't always feel good.
Yeah.
So I went to meetings when I was out there, and I used to sneak out of the house. I mean, crazy, but I used to sneak out of the house to go to like 10 o'clock meetings at night. And the only places I could find them were like in Jamaica and all these places, like, and I'm very comfortable in these places, because that's my jam. You know, I love people that are real and raw, and I just love real. You know, there's nothing like people who are authentic and love you, and you get raw hugs, and it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter. I've learned to get past the color thing. because for me, it doesn't matter. Like, we're all the same underneath the skin. You know, I come from a place where a lot of people are bigots and racists, and I see the damage it does, and it's just never been part of who I am. I got so much love there. I got so much love and so much support. And then weird things start happening. Then my younger son starts trying to kill himself 3 times. So my mother's just died. My younger son's trying to kill himself 3 times. He's cutting. He's frustrated. He's got a gaming addiction. He watched someone commit suicide online while he was 9 years old. And this kid killed himself, and he watched while the kid was in the chair, and the parents came in and their reaction, and he never told anybody, and he got into gaming, and that really made his life unmanageable, because it doesn't matter what it is, it becomes our primary focus and our primary purpose, and we lie and we do all the stuff we do because we're addicts. That's what we do, because all we want to do is use, you know, that obsession, that compulsion, that inability to stop, that hamster wheel. So I'm dealing with his, and I'm dealing with my older son who is using, and I'm unmanageable. I'm unmanageable just before all of this. And he decides to move out and go live in a crack house, because that's what he decided to do. And he's failing school, and he's not getting through school, and he's a bright kid, and he's got ADHD. And I introduced him into all the medications that come with ADHD, and it's speed. Essentially, my kids were doing the same stuff that I was doing when I was a kid. This time I was medically prescribed. And even though I got that advice, I held a lot of guilt, because I'd done a lot of, I thought I'd brought damage to my kids, and that I was responsible for a lot of what was happening. And this is stuff I had to work through with my sponsor. So all of a sudden, going through stuff like, how do you deal with a kid who's trying to kill themselves? And how do you know your kid on the street is okay? And all of a sudden, I had to have some power that was greater than me. When I run out of the strength and the ability to do that, I need something else greater than me. And that's where my other God came in, my group of druggies, my group of drug addicts. Those are the people that gave me strength and hope, because they've been through stuff. You know, so when I say God, my God isn't like that Moses that you see, or those pictures you see, or it's not that religious kind of higher power. For me, my first higher power was Clint Eastwood. Okay. And I always said I held on to Clint Eastwood my first like 18 months of recovery, because Dirty Harry rocked. Okay. He was awesome. Okay. He was strong. He was resilient. He would protect, you know. But anyway, I started developing I never knew what a higher power was. And it's something I had to work through. And through this, I had to believe my kids had their own. And it doesn't matter what it is. You know, whatever it is that keeps you clean, whether you have one or you don't have one, it doesn't matter. To me, I need something greater than me. And that is the strength that I get, because I am a very spiritual person. You know, I really believe in the power of prayer. It got me where I am. I'm not a religious person. I can't stand religion. It is the greatest divider, and it doesn't work for me. For me, it's more a connection, a universal connection. Is definitely, I'm an energy being, and I need those hugs at a meeting, and I need to see people when I'm connecting. But so anyway, so my kid's going through this, and I go through it with my friends, and then all of a sudden COVID hits. So COVID hits. Okay, so what happens? January, just before all the lockdown, I land up in a hospital for 2 weeks. They had to remove another piece of my colon. So in the last 5 years, I've had 4 major surgeries. So basically being cut from here to like basically my groin area, getting 36 staples at a time. That's what's been the story of my life. Okay. And during those times, knowing I've got to go in for these surgeries, I go, how do I do this as a drug addict? How do you go through surgeries and not use narcotics? So I'd speak to my sponsor, and I started getting into making jewelry, and I started into giving jewelry as service to like nurses and doctors and saying thank you. You know, and I started putting messages onto the stuff that I make, so it would keep me grounded, so I could focus on something else other than me, because, you know, I'm my greatest focus. The stuff that happens in here can keep me entertained for days and hours, because I'm that time traveler, you know, projecting into the future what could happen and the catastrophes, or you know, the past, or the resentments, what should have, could have, why didn't you choose, all that kind of stuff. So I learned a couple of things. You know, for me, pain and discomfort show up in the same way. The actual periods of pain were very short. Periods of discomfort were longer, but it gave me the ability to go through what I did without narcotics and telling my doctors and leaving with extra strength Tylenol. How is that possible? 2 weeks in hospital. So anyway, 2 weeks in hospital, I get out and I go, well, 3 weeks later, we go lockdown with COVID. And I'm going, well, my higher power didn't kill me with this, what I just went through with this blockage and my colon. I'm sure it's not going to take me out over the flu. So my addiction goes 24/7. And I'm fortunate enough to be in a place where I never stop going to meetings. There are days when there'd be 4 of us in a meeting or 5 of us in the meeting, and it was the same people. And that's what we did every single day. And I got a really strong core of friendship. And I learned men and women can be friends and brothers and sisters. And sex doesn't mean intimacy. Intimacy is being able to see into me and being able to share that part of you that's really vulnerable and hurt, and being able to heal it and do that with other people. And part of that is the recovery and being in a safe place where you can do that, where whether people are judging you or not, it doesn't matter. They're loving you anyway. They're loving you for who you are. And through this process, I've learned to love me. And I've come to terms with me. And through this process in loving me, I realized that the place that I was and the relationship that I was in, I was less than the dog. That was my role in the place that I was. So it was my husband, his work, the kids, the dog, and then me. And I'd signed up for that. I became the mat. I signed up to be the doormat. It's where I put myself, and it's what I believe was the absolute best and the most that I deserve. And that's how I lived for 25 years. 25 years, that's where I put myself, believing that I was a piece of crap, a piece of shit, and really not worth much more. And then I started thinking, what am I teaching my kids? How can I teach my kids to love themselves if I don't love me? How do I go through this life of being where I am, not having a relationship with the most important person in my life, which is me? And part of that, what I got is through being in a recovery process. And that's working through stuff with my sponsor, through getting into service, through practicing gratitude. So the things that started helping me. So I asked my husband for a divorce, by the way. And he never ever thought I'd leave him because I never controlled the money. So everything I earned always went into the house. Everything he earned got to get saved. He got to make decisions. And all of a sudden I was going, how do I leave? I can't afford to leave. How do I do this? Did I afford to leave? I paid for my own house. I got my own house. I bought my own car. I did all the stuff. I got my own health insurance for the first time ever in my whole life, because I came from that place where women needed to be looked after. Coming from this misogynistic South Africa where people were different, men were better. All of a sudden I realized other things. I had courage and strength. And there's certain things I've done in the last 4.5 years. And I've done a lot. One is, and I've done perfectly. I've done absolutely perfectly. One is I haven't picked up, no matter how much I've wanted to, and I've wanted to a lot, and I still do, because the one thing I do know is as an addict, I want to pick up because that's how I'm geared and that's how I'm wired and that's what I think of them on. But it's just a thought most of the times. And there's some days I'll just stay in bed and go, and it's not days I spend in bed because that will kill me. I mean, the depression and anxiety that I live with, if I don't get out of bed and keep things moving, I won't move. But at night when I get into bed and I really feel like using, and it can be, go hang out at the bar. Hey, you like playing pool? Okay. Why not? You on your own, you can go party. Everyone else looks like they're having a fabulous time, because the people who don't come back, I think they're on the yacht drinking cocktails, living the best life ever. And so I get newcomers that come in and start sharing how bad things really are and how terrible they feel. And then I remember what brought me here and why I'm here, because I forget stuff. Some nights I've just got to hang onto the bed and say, just stay here till morning and it's going to be okay. Many times I just had to reach out to people. And one of the other things I've done a lot of that I never, ever, 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 ever did was cry. I become the biggest crier. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. So there are a couple of things that keep me healthy that I choose, and not that I choose to do, but I get to do. And when I say I get to do it, is with gratitude and grace and just really with absolute joy. They say the grateful addict will never use, and that's a misnomer. And for me, that's a lie, because I was very grateful and I landed up in South Africa. I've got everything. I'm grateful for everything. Got my health, got everything. but I wasn't grateful for my recovery. And today I'm grateful for my recovery. And that's the most important thing in my life. You know, the way that I keep that forefront is by being of service to me. Gratitude is that action word for me. I can say I'm grateful. I've said a lot of shit in my day. I've said I'm sorry. I've said so many things, but it's really the things that we do that count. And it starts with me. I've treated this body badly. I've treated Heidi. Heidi said the worst things to her that she would never, ever allow other people to say to her. I've said stuff that I absolutely would not tolerate from anyone else, but I've said it to myself. I've beaten myself up.
What kind of things would you say to yourself?
You're not worth it. You're ugly. You can't do this. There's no ways. It's not worth living. You're not worth living. This life, you don't deserve happiness. You don't deserve joy. This is the way it's supposed to be. You don't deserve friends. You deserve to be alone. This will kill you. This will kill you. I come up with a million reasons and excuses why not to do good stuff for myself. I shoot myself in the foot consistently. I procrastinate over stuff that's good for me. I just do that stuff. But there are a couple of things I don't do. So I run my food like I run my other program. There's certain things I don't put in my body. I haven't touched any starches, rice, potatoes, wheat, or any corn syrup, or any of those sweets since February the 17th, 2016. I haven't put a narcotic or a drug into my system since the 23rd of September, 2017. You know, and it's not that it's always an option. I can always do that stuff. I just know what happens when I do. You know, I get that allergic reaction and it becomes right back where I started. And it disconnects me from the people that I love and from what I call my higher power, because there is a spiritual connection there. And the way that I maintain that is I go to the gym, not because I love the gym. I go to the gym because I've got ADD, okay? And at the gym, I can't sit and meditate. I'm not that one that can sit and go quiet and focused and it's quiet and serene. That's not my thing. You know, for me, I go to gym so that first I can put on my music on the walk when I go walking on the treadmill and get into a different kind of vibe. Okay, I can sit on the bicycle and send out my morning text to people to let them know that I'm alive. That's a big fear of mine, is that I will die in bed and no one will ever know me, or I will live under a bridge and lose everything. Okay. And if I die in my house and no one finds me, the dogs are going to eat my face, okay, and my hands and all the other bits. Okay. I'll be dog food forever. And then the other thing, so I get to send that, and I also have a gratitude list that I send out every single day because I need to be reminded. I need to remember to be grateful because I am, you know, it's a constant balance for me between ego and gratitude, you know, and the gratitude for me shows up in service. And anytime anyone says, I'm doing this, will you share about addiction? I'm there. Anytime you need a meeting taken somewhere, I'm there, you know, and it's not because it's about looking good for me, it's about feeling good. That stuff makes me feel good, you know, being of service to other people takes me out of me. I've learned so much from people, you know, I've learned so much from them. Today I'm open-minded, I'm a lot more honest. Please note I said a lot more honest. I'll lie about crazy shit, but I don't lie about how I feel. Because I come from that place where you'd say, how do you feel today? And I go, I'm good, I'm fine. How's the cursing? Are you allowed to curse here or not really?
No, you're allowed.
Okay, so fine for me was described as like fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So every time, so that's the place I came from. You could have a hole in your head, a lymph node saying, how are you? I'm fine, okay? You never ever told the truth. Today I'll tell you the truth, okay? And it doesn't make me any weaker, it just makes me human. And today I'm more a human being than a human doing, because that's how I spend most of my life. And today I've actually got an amazing relationship with both my kids. Both of them are in college. I talk to them just about every single day. They tell me they love me. And that's amazing. From the kid who told me that I'm a bitch, okay, and that I must get out of his life and he never ever wants to see me again. So there are tremendous things that come with recovery, and it's hard and it's difficult and it's scary. But you know what? so worth it. So worth it being able to say, listen, I need help. Just help me. How do I do this? I don't know how to do this. You know, and when you're amongst loving people in a place that people care, where kindness is an important thing, and compassion and empathy, and these are all things that I learned. And as my father died, and honestly, as I've been through the stuff, I've learned to have more empathy. And as my relationship with my ex changed, we got a friendship today. If I wasn't in recovery, it would be that F yous, this is mine, you're not getting this. You know, it would have been that whole kind of acrimonious kind of thing. And today, I want to be the woman I'm proud of. No, so not every single day is a good day, but I promise you one thing, I have a lot of fun. I get to choose, you know, trying and difficult things happen. But I must tell you something, it doesn't make it a good or bad day. I had good or bad days when I was using. That's how I define my days. You know, it was a good day or a bad day. Today I have crying moments and fun moments and exciting moments and scary moments and so many different things. My life's a lot more colorful. I can tell you what color I like. I like purple. You know, I never knew that before. My life was very small. Today my life is huge. It's full. It's amazing. So I'm truly blessed and grateful. Now that I've been rambling for what, 6 hours?
No, 6.5. No, you're good. So I have one last question for you. Do you have any advice for people watching and listening?
Yes. I actually have quite a bit of advice.
Let's have it.
One is, so just a couple of things. One is you're important. You're worth it. You're absolutely worth it. You know, give yourself this break. The war is over. You lost. There is a life, you know, just give it a shot. Try it. Show up. Do something. You know, recovery is an action word. What are you willing to do for your recovery? Because I promise you one thing, if it's not working for you, you don't do the things that I suggested, like go to meetings, develop a network, have some people to talk to, don't pick up. Don't pick up. This is a great topic, actually. I'm sorry, I just have to say this because how do you not pick up when you are a food addict? You need food to live, okay? I want to talk about this because this
we
is
have
my
talked
jam.
about that. We'll definitely we should do a
Okay.
podcast on that specifically. You and I will talk about that later.
Okay, we're going to talk about this, but we're not going to talk about this now. So,
But it is true because you don't need to do crack to live. You don't need to do heroin, but you have to eat. End of story. You don't eat, you die.
Oh, we are going to talk. Okay. So the other thing is ask for help. Become a little, don't know everything. Come from the place that you don't know anything. Because the one thing I do know is I knew what I knew, and it made me sick and it made me miserable and it kept me sick and miserable. And I only came into the rooms at 52 years old. I was sick and suffering for 32 years. That is a long time. You don't need to do this. I've done it for you. So I just step in, come say hi. Get involved in your life. It's awesome.
That's great. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. How you feeling? How do you feel right now?
I feel awesome. I absolutely feel awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. Honestly, you guys are amazing. Who's ever doing this, thank you. Gratitude and love and just really blessings.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very much. I try my hardest, and I know it's just this is a good platform. A lot of people have a story to tell, and I want to hear it, and a lot of people want to hear it. I hear a lot when someone tells me, oh, I listened to this podcast and I related to the person. So we get that a lot.
So, we all have stories and we don't connect with all the stuff we've got in our lives. It's kind of taken us apart from each other. And that was one of the things that I did as well, with the Charming Connections, is we need that connection. We need that human interaction because we need to be seen and heard. Validates us.
Yeah, like the fourth pillar, you need community.
Me too.
All right. So for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you heard and saw, go below, give us a like. Also subscribe to see when we upload new videos. We're on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook. We're on TikTok as well. So check us out. I hope you like what you heard and saw today. And until next time.